Hello and welcome back to another idea book review series. Today we have a special guest in the person of Mr. Steve Ramirez, the author of the book The Great Migration. This book has garnered over 75-star reviews on Amazon and was the book of the month for January at Online Book Club. It was also named a finalist in the 2021 Wishing Shelf Book Awards for Adult Fiction and the Self-Publishing Reviews 2021. That's to show you how amazing this book is. Without further ado, let's welcome the author to join this conversation. Good morning, Mr. Ramirez. Could you please introduce yourself and also tell us what inspired you to become a writer?
Okay, my name is Steve Ramirez, and I wrote a trilogy called the S'orne Saga, and the first book is The Great Migration. And to be honest, I had never really thought about writing before, and I had become frustrated with a show that my wife and I were watching, and I kept for like a week or two complaining to her, like, it ended so badly, why would they end it this badly, after all that great work they did. And she'd kind of had it with me complaining about it. She said, Steve, and I said to her, is it really so hard to end a story well? And she said, I don't know. Why don't you go over the computer and write a story and find out for yourself? And I was like, you know what? I think I will do that. And that's literally how I started writing, is after a couple weeks of, seeing what I could come up with, I told her, I said, you know what? I think I have a story here, but I have to study relativity. I have to study some quantum mechanics. I have to study some physics here. So I spent the summer just studying the basics, try to see if I could work it into the plot structure, and the book came out like 18 months later, a year and a half later. I had the book in my hand.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It's quite fascinating to hear how you drew your inspiration from a show. In the opening scene of Book 1, we are introduced to Thunder Valley with the barons and the Brontiers. Could you please describe the inspiration behind that particular setting?
Every animal in the book is taken from natural history. The Brontiers were, when I was a child, the Brontiers were called Brontiers. Now that's more of the family of animals, and they're called like Megacerops or Embolotherium. They have all these very specific names, but they actually existed about 50 million years ago. And after the dinosaurs died out, the mammals kind of recovered and spread across the planet and grew into these massive, like what they call megafauna. And I've always found that period of natural history very interesting. And so the barong were animals called, I based that animal off something called Hyenodon gigas, which is the largest species of hyenodon. And they existed along, I think around the time of the Brontiers. But I wanted the Great Migration, as you see it in the first two chapters, was based off the wildebeest migration, across the Serengeti. That's what I had always, associated the phrase "the Great Migration" with, and I thought, well, that would be a great, ultimately, a metaphor for what's happening in this story. It's really a metaphor for how the natural world was here long before humans arrived, and it will be here long after we, either evolve into something that we aren't, or, whether humans are around or not, the natural world will exist. And that's really what the Great Migration is in the trilogy. It's the metaphor that, and then Cortez says that in the third chapter when he's talking to Jerica. There's a line he has where he says, ultimately, human beings are just another small thing getting in the Brontiers' way. And that's really what I was going for there, just to say, we have our place in the natural world, but the natural world doesn't need us to exist.
Thank you for providing insights into the story setting. How did you approach developing your characters, particularly the main character, Bellona?
It's funny. I wrote that first chapter, I think, 36 times, because I didn't know who the main character was going to be. As I said, I was kind of doing this. I had an idea for the story, but I didn't, and I knew I wanted to have a lot of characters, but I didn't know who the main character was going to be. And so I kept writing that chapter over and over, looking at different characters. Luda was actually who I thought would be the main character, but Luda is he's a fully developed character. Like he's doing what he's meant to be doing, and he's doing it well. And I thought, well, if Luda's the main character, then this story is just going to be him helping people develop themselves, and that didn't appeal to me. I wanted somebody that would have a character arc that spanned 3 books. And so I looked at Lacey. I looked at every character, and some of them were interesting in their own way, but Bologna's backstory came to me the easiest, because I think a lot of us can relate to her in that, she's insecure about her place in the world, her place in that party. She doesn't see herself the way other people do, and I think that's often the case with all of us. And so I wanted her to find her voice slowly and develop it over 3 books, so she could kind of finish the final book just a really strong, fully developed person who has a very clear view on the world, in that, life isn't perfect. You just have to stay strong and keep moving forward. And that's something she does, I think, naturally. I think it takes her 3 books to understand exactly how strong she really is. And that's what made her interesting to me as the author, is like, okay, this is going to be another opportunity for Bologna to have an insight, or to hit another obstacle, or to maybe almost give up, being pushed to the point of emotional pain, mental pain, because they really are. She dove willingly into the chaos of Thunder Valley. But, as a reader, you're picking that up at the very end of that adventure. And everything after that point, she didn't sign up for. But because she made it through Thunder Valley, that tour of Thunder Valley, she is prepared to deal with everything that happens, no matter how, supernatural or how over the top it is. And that's, I think one of my early taglines was, who will survive, the strong or the lucky? And I think you see a little bit of both in the telling of that first book.
That's really interesting. So did you have a clear vision or roadmap of how you wanted the story to progress, or you just went with the flow while you were writing?
That's a really good question. And I had a vision of the story that never came to pass, because I had those first few chapters, I was writing them to get to Gerdon. Remember, with Prince Lemuel and his bodyguards? My original idea was, once I got to that, the story was going to be Prince Lemuel and his bodyguards trying to make it back to the Crystal City. But by the time I got there, the story had become so developed and the characters had come to life that at the end of those Gerdon chapters, I think there's 4 Gerdon chapters. In that 4th chapter, I kept writing it and rewriting it, trying to change the way it ended, because obviously the way it ended was not consistent with the original story I had. And I finally went, that this is not the story anymore. Like, the story is with Bologna, and the story is with Dorinda and Cortez. Like, this is going to serve as a story within the story to kind of show the reader what's coming, at the end of the first book, to show them the stakes, like what's at stake, the potential destruction of the S'orne invasion, and what it's going to take to survive something like that. Because you have people in those chapters doing everything right, doing everything they possibly could to survive, and still not making it out. And so, I guess to answer your question, I thought I had a plan, But once the story started to come to life, I was more just kind of following it to its natural conclusion. There was a point where I just kind of went, this story is not what I intended, but it is organic in the way I wrote it. Because, the exciting thing about it is, then I thought, okay, well, geez, what's going to happen? And I had to sit down about halfway through the book and think, how is this going to end? And, once I got that idea, then I was like, oh, that's going to be exciting.
Right. What message or themes do you hope readers will take away from your book?
That's another good question. For me, the first book is a survival story. It's really about the more prepared you are. And I think this is my day job is in sales. And there's a saying that you always hear in sales, like the harder I work, the luckier I get. The way I see the first book is the people that were prepared to survive, the people that had done what it took to get strong in the world, those were the people with the best chance of making it through that horribly apocalyptic situation at the end of the first book, where we see, tens of thousands of people, their lives are at risk. And, you can't follow all of them, but, the ones that showed up to that festival that had not been taking it easy in their life, the people that had been pushing themselves and working hard, they were the ones that, some people had no chance to survive it, but everybody that made it, their resume, so to speak, is in the book already. Like they're prepared to live through that.
I'm sure readers will be deeply moved by the depth of this message. What advice do you have for aspiring writers watching this video?
Well, I would say that if I've said this to everybody I've met since I started writing, if you have a story in your head and you have any desire to put that story into print, do it. Don't hold that. And you don't have to tell anybody you're doing it. But there is if you don't want to, if you want to keep it private, keep it private. I told people what I was doing to keep myself accountable. And that's how the books got written on a very timely manner. But it's a very rewarding experience to create a story. And there are so many resources available to us now. I learned how to write on YouTube, on blog posts that other people have done. There's all this advice, and you can listen to it all or none of it, but it's out there for you. And now with things like Kindle Direct, you don't even have to be accepted by a publisher to get your book published. When I found out I could self-publish with no obligation to buy any books, because back when I was young, people that self-published had to buy like 200 or 500 of their own books from the publisher. That was part of the deal. And everybody would end up losing money. Well, these books now, first of all, most of the books I sell are either digital copies or they're read through Kindle Unlimited. That's almost all of my books. And the paperback books that are bought, they're print on demand. So I'm not obligated to buy any books or keep any kind of inventory. The people that order, that prefer a physical copy of a book, that book is printed and made once they order it. So you can do this. There's Photoshop or other free websites. You can make your own covers. If you don't want to spend any money at all, you just want to do it by, as a hobby, as I do it, there's no reason to stop you. If you have a computer, or in an extreme case, a phone, then you have access to all this. And just do it. Because it's a wonderful, wonderful, to say, it's a rare thing. People are so supportive. Like usually somebody will say, oh yeah, Steve wrote 3 books or whatever. And they're just like, really? And it's just such an interesting thing to them. And it's a fun way to interact with people. Because, invariably you'll have people going, well, I have an idea, and I'll just be like, go for it. Go for it. Whether you want to tell people about it or not, it doesn't matter. get those wheels spinning, because it will give you an excuse. It gave me an excuse to learn about all these different things. Like, there's a lot of stuff in that book. I knew almost none of it prior. I would read with intention, say, okay, I've got to learn about, blacksmithing. And I would find a book. The blacksmithing books are few and far between. That was more YouTube channels, but like geology, ecology, agriculture, all those things that are kind of in the book as just part of the background. I had to learn about all that, so it made sense. The politics, like, what is a constitutional monarchy? Like, I didn't know about any of that stuff. And it was just an excuse to learn about all this stuff. I would have all these notes and then just compile them, order them, and figure out where they could go in the story if they had a place. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And for no other reason, I would say do it because of that reason.
Thank you so much for that valuable piece of advice. I'm sure many aspiring writers out there will find it really helpful. And that'll be all, Mr. Steve Ramirez. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, it was a great pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for the invitation.
The link to get yourself a copy of The Great Migration is in the description box. Do have to check it out. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.